So, I know you guys don't have much time and willingness to read, so I'm gonna walk you through the combat rules that we already tried on yourself, so probably they will be a bit easier to understand, but I'm gonna go step by step through the combat. So, if in combat you have quite a few potential actions, you can attack either by brawl, so hand-to-hand combat, or using a knife or a sword or a club, or you can use firearms such as guns or bows in this case. You can make a maneuver. Maneuver is, for example, taking a gun, taking a weapon from somebody, or pulling them to the ground, or throwing them down the stairs. You can flee, so you can escape. You can cast a spell, if you have any, and you can take any other action that is suitable for situations such as trying to start or repair a car, picking a lock. They may take more than one round, depending on circumstances. Now, let's go first with the hand-to-hand combat known as brawl. So, when you're deciding to brawl, or let's put it a different way, if you are the subject of an attack in a hand-to-hand combat or brawl, you have two possibilities. You can either try to dodge, or you can try to counterattack. These are two different actions with a little bit of a different rules. So if you are trying to counterattack, you have to make a roll and oppose the roll to the attack that is happening to you. If you have a better success, so for example you have an extreme success but your opponent has only a normal success, then you succeed in your counterattack and you are the one dealing the damage. However, if you have a worse roll or there is a tie, then you are on the receiving end of the attack. Even if you tied with your attacker, you're getting the damage. Now, dodge is a different story, because dodge works similarly, in the meaning that you make an opposed roll, but you roll for dodge, and if there is a tie in dodge versus attack, then the dodging character wins this tie. So you dodge even if you had the normal success and your opponent also had a normal success. So, speaking of successes, what happens if you roll an extreme success in a brawl combat? If you have an extreme success and you're using a blunt weapon, such as your fists or a club or a crowbar, then you deal maximum damage plus your damage bonus that you have on your character sheet. However, and this is quite interesting, and you already see that the fighting is pretty lethal. If you're using a sharp weapon, even a simple sharp weapon such as a spring knife, and have a critical success, then you deal maximum damage plus your damage bonus plus a roll. So for example, if you're using a knife that deals 1d4 damage and you have bonus damage of 1, then you will roll one die. You can roll 4, so it's 4 plus 4 of the maximum damage plus your MO, the damage bonus. You deal 9 damage with just one move, which can kill a character, and is most certainly a major wound. Now, another thing you can do in combat is maneuvering. So, first of all, when executing a maneuver, you have to check your build. If your build is greater than the build of your opponent, you can execute the move normally, as if rolling for brawl combat. If the maneuvering's character that is executing the maneuver build is smaller than the opponent, you get a penalty dice. However, if the maneuvering's character build is smaller by 3 or more, the maneuver is impossible. And it's quite logical in the meaning that if your build is like 3 and you're trying... Okay, so let's put it this way. If you're trying to incapacitate or pin down to the ground an opponent that is a bear or a horse, you have basically no chance of succeeding. They're so much stronger than you, so the maneuver becomes impossible. The way executing a maneuver, if it's possible, works, it's you roll for brawl. If you're successful against your opponent, then you succeed. Your opponent can use the same things as they can in normal combat, so they can either try to dodge or they try to counterattack. going forward, surprise combat. So there's two ways the combat can start. It's either it just kind of starts automatically, as in a scenario where you open a door, you walk into a room, there are your enemies in the room, you enter it, you all know that the fight begins, and it starts with the dexterity order. Initiative is determined by dexterity, so the person with the highest dex comes first, with the lowest dexterity comes last. But there's also a surprise attacks possibility. So if you're attacking, you can roll for stealth, for example, and if you're the subject of the attack, you can roll for spot hidden or listening, depending on a situation. If the attacked person is aware that the attack is coming, they are allowed to dodge or counterattack, and after the attack is executed, the normal initiative kicks in. However, if they are not aware, so for example, you're sneaking on somebody and they failed their listening roll and you succeeded in your stealth, you get a free attack. In some cases, for example, like attacking from behind in a loud, dark environment, you may get an automatic success, bashing somebody on the head. Always nice, right? So that's it for surprise attacks. What happens with the outnumbered mechanics? This is quite interesting and quite cruel. So if you're in a close combat, and it only applies to close combat, if you're outnumbered, then the opponent has an advantage. So how it works is that after first attacks is land on you, let's say you are being attacked by 3 different characters, you get normal dodge or normal counterattack on your first action, but every next attack the attacker gets a bonus die because there are just so many of them and you're just one, and it works both ways, obviously. Now, ranged or thrown weapons. So when it comes to the rules, things such as bow, sling, or how it's called, throwing stuff, crossbow, works as firearms. They're treated as firearms. Attackers, persons being attacked can dodge it, but they cannot counterattack, as in brawl combat. Now, the bonus damage also applies similarly to when you're using a knife or a club or a sword. You add your bonus damage that your character has. They add half of it when using things such as a sling or a bow, but not a crossbow, because crossbow doesn't really utilize your muscles in the same way. Okay, fleeing, and this is quite important because this works differently in different systems. So in fleeing, when it comes to fleeing in your turn in a round, it's a free action. Unless you're incapacitated or pinned down, then you can always make an escape. It can turn into a chase, or somebody can shoot after you, but as a general rule, fleeing is an action you can always take, unless you're incapable of doing so. Next, armor. None of you as characters have armor, but different things can work as an armor in the game. What is important to remember, and kind of obvious, is that armor does not protect you against things such as spells or poison or falling damage. Natural. Different types of armor can be checked in the book. Some of them are obvious, like Kevlar, like some kind of a vest, but also there are types of armor that can be found on the spot, such as a brick wall. If you're hiding entirely behind a brick wall, it kind of acts as your armor. So when you're hit and you're wearing an armor, you're hiding behind something acting as an armor, the armor rating of this given object is absorbing parts of the damage. So for example, major big sandbags are 20 armor. If you're being shot at with a sniper rifle and you're hiding entirely behind a sandbag, the sandbag will probably absorb the entirety of the damage. Next, firearms and fighting with firearms. So it works to some degree similarly to Brawl, and you have already experienced it. So first you roll for a specific firearm type, being a handgun or a rifle. The difference being that if a combat begins and you have a firearm that is ready to shoot, and I don't mean in your holster but in your hand, then you get plus 50 dexterity. The logic here being that it's always quicker to pull the trigger than to, for example, swing with a sword, even if you have a very athletic character. So a ready-to-shoot firearm gives you dexterity bonus, being initiative bonus. So there are some rules that we have violated during our last session when dealing with firearms, and I'll try to make them straight here. So when it comes to modifiers, that is normal difficulty, hard difficulty, and extreme difficulty, they're only concerning the distance. So if an opponent is within the basic range of a firearm, you roll with normal difficulty. Then with far range, that is basic range times 2, it's a hard difficulty, and further range, that is the extreme difficulty. So each firearm has a basic range to it. For example, for a handgun, sometimes let's say it's 5 meters. So if a person is standing 10 meters away, you get, if your opponent is standing 10 meters away, you get a hard difficulty roll because it's beyond basic, right? And the same goes with extreme, just higher multipliers. So, but other modifiers, and this is what I fucked up, other modifiers in combat should be resolved with penalty or bonus dice. So for example, common modifiers can be cover. If a person is partially covered and you're trying to shoot them, you have a penalty die. If they're protected by something, you get a penalty die. If there is, on the flip side, if there's direct range, so somebody standing 1 meter in front of you, you have a bonus die because it's so hard not to hit them, right? It's an easy shot. Aiming. This is quite a special rule, which I'm reluctant about. So the way aiming works in this game is you can take your turn just to aim, and then on the next turn that you execute, you get 1 bonus die. However, if you're aiming and then a different character has their move, for example, they shoot at you and you have to dodge, you have to move, or you get damage, your aiming is cancelled. So the way my mathematics works is that aiming isn't very suitable most of the times. It's very circumstance based. Usually I think it would make more sense just to shoot every round, unless you're, unless there's like special circumstances that occur. Now, additional modifiers that can happen in a game is what we had on the last session. So a moving target. So if you're shooting at a moving target, you get 1 penalty dice. This is what we should have done on top of the modifiers coming from the further range. Different modifiers come, for example, as size. It's easier to shoot a bear than to shoot a midget. Reloading, this is important. So you have 2 options with reloading. You can either reload a weapon and it takes 1 entire turn for reloading a mag to like a clip to your pistol, or if you're reloading, for example, a revolver, loading 2 bullets takes an entire round. However, you can go around it and you can load just 1 bullet and then shoot within 1 turn, but it gives you a penalty die because you're rushing it. Last but not least, shooting a doublet or triplet, so where you can shoot more than 1 bullet in a round, gives you penalty die per each bullet. And shooting at a brawl, and I love this mechanics. If you're shooting at a character that is engaged in a fight, so let's say that Sal is fighting a werewolf with a knife, and Michał is trying to shoot the werewolf. If you roll a critical failure, you will shoot your friend, and they may die. On top of this, you get a penalty die, so there's a fairly big chance that you will stumble and fuck it up. So it's quite dangerous. The most confusing mechanics to me is an automatic fire. There are 2 types of automatic fire. You either go full auto or you shoot with series, but I will have to do some more meditation on it because my understanding is confusing and I don't want to confuse you any further. Now, wounds and damage, and you already have experience in this department. So there are basically 3 things that can happen when you get damage. If you get any damage at a point, that is smaller than half of your HP points, you just get normal damage, and it's fine. If you get a hit that is larger or equal to half of your HP points, you get a major wound, like Sal did on the last session, and I will get more into this. If you get damage that is larger or equal to your HP, no, that is larger than your HP, you're dead. This is what happened to the cultist, the strange dude that was hit by a car that Sal was driving. He just got so much damage in one shot that he was dead on arrival. There's no discussion there. So, going back, normal wounds, what happens? A character generally cannot die from normal wounds. If your HP drops to 0, but you only receive normal wounds, so like smaller wounds, they fall unconscious and they will begin a healing process after a while. Major wound is a different story. This is what Sal is suffering from currently. So if a character's HP drops to 0 and they do have a major wound, they may die. Upon getting a major wound, you have to do the following. You mark the major wound on your character sheet, you fall to the ground, and you make a constitution roll. If you fail the constitution roll, you lose consciousness. When your HP drops to 0 and you have a major wound, you're in agony. And we'll get to agony in a moment. So, 0 HP, the fun stuff. So, if your HP drops to 0, you stop tracking it, you can't have minus HPs. If only minor wounds have been received, as I said, you will be fine. If you had a major wound, however, you will die. If you have 0 HP and a major wound, you're in agony. If you had full HP, that's interesting. If you had full HP and you got a damage equal to your HP, exactly equal, you have a major wound right now and 0 HP, so again, you're in agony. However, if you receive damage that is larger than your base HP, what happened to the guy that was hit by a car, you're dead on arrival. Now healing. So using a medicine takes an hour minimum of a medicine roll, so this is what the nurse was doing in the hospital to Sal. And if it's successful, the HP gets back, 1d3 HP is restored. Now, first aid, this is something that you also did on Sal. Successful first aid roll gives back 1 point of HP. And it should be done within 1 hour of receiving the damage. 2 people can actually cooperate when providing first aid, so that helps in the way that only one of those people need to succeed in order for the first aid to be successful. Going back to agony, the fun part again. So, again, if you received a major wound and you have 0 HP, you are in agony. You mark agony on your character sheet. You lose consciousness, period, no other ways to stop it. And at the end of the round, you need to make a constitution roll. If you fail the constitution roll, you die. Only first aid can help here. No medicine roll is really useful at this point. If you successfully deliver the first aid to a person that is in agony, they get 1 HP back, but only temporarily. Only then you can roll for medicine. Anyway, when you stabilize this person with the first aid, they still have to roll constitution every hour. If they fail at any point, you lose, the person loses their temporary 1 HP and they're back in agony. Rinse and repeat until they get proper medical care. If you succeed in both the first aid and the medicine, you can begin the healing process and you're back out of this agony. So getting HP back is a lengthy process, especially for major wounds. If you get no major wounds, you get 1 HP a day back. You recover 1 HP a day. However, if you got major wounds, you roll for constitution once a week, and if you succeed, then you get 1d3 HP back, so from 1 to 3. If you get an extreme success, you get 2 d3, so you get from 2 to 6 HP back a week. There are some circumstances. So, for example, if you're chilling, if you're receiving medical care, like in a hospital or a comfortable environment, you get a bonus die. However, on the flip side, if you're in the trenches in a dungeon in some bad circumstances, you get a penalty die. So it's harder to recover. That would be it from the only 20 minutes, folks. When it comes to getting damage, dealing damage, HPs, fighting and healing. I'll try to look up on this automatic fire and firing in series because I honestly don't understand the handbook. Have a good one.